All right, guys, we want to welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick are going to be looking at the Oklahoma Sooners. And is this defense ready to take over the SEC in Brent Venables' third year? It was a tough first season for Oklahoma in 2022, which we kind of expected, right? They gave 30 points per game, 461 yards per game. Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch didn't exactly leave this defense in the greatest state of mind. So, obviously, Venables had a lot to clean up in his first year. This past season, numbers improved significantly. Got down to 23.5 points per game, 389 yards per game. Enters his third season. His third year at Clemson is when his defenses started to really enter that elite territory. 16.7 points per game, 260 yards per game. I mean, it's phenomenal numbers that he, was able to mark up in 2014. During his tenure at Clemson, his defense has allowed 14 points per game or less in 4 different seasons, a streak of 3 straight where they were in the 13s. So less than 2 touchdowns per game all year long on a multi-year basis, Nick. That is flat out phenomenal. And that's going to be the expectation going into this conference, or do you think that's a little bit too much to ask of, especially at this moment in time?
I think it's certainly too much to ask in the SEC. I think this defense can continue to improve and cut down those numbers. This past year in 2023, 23.5 points per game is what they gave up. I think they can certainly get closer to 17 points per game, 18, that kind of range, 17, 18. I think that's a target range with where this defense is going. Brent Venables is obviously a great defensive mind. He spent a long time in Oklahoma as a co-defensive coordinator and defensive coordinator under Bob Stoops before going and being under Dabo Swinney at Clemson before getting the head coaching role. He's done a lot of work on this defense. Obviously, they needed a lot of work. The Lincoln Riley days, they weren't really playing a whole lot of defense out there in Norman. Now he's sort of steadying the ship, getting things right. 23.5 points per game is a respectable number in my opinion, and they continue to improve that if they work hard, continue this offseason, they kind of put the right pieces together.
The Oklahoma defense, 28 sacks in year 1, down to 24 this past season. Certainly something that they want to see change. They have more success on this side of the ball. In terms of, run defense, they improved significantly, down from 187 to 138 yards per game. But there were times where they just didn't look great on this side of the ball, especially in conference play. They got brutalized against Kansas for 225 and 4 scores. They held Ollie Gordon in check for the most part, but they were still teetering on the 150 mark, still had a trio of touchdowns. BYU, for no reason at all, had 200-plus rushing on them. They were really good against Arizona, though. 26 attempts, 29 yards. So when they played out of conference, they were phenomenal. The other 3 opponents they played non-conference, they held them to absolutely nothing on the ground. But in Big 12 play, Nick, it just was not very good. 170 yards per game they allowed, 4.6 yards per carry. That certainly is not a good omen moving forward for Oklahoma, especially with a good bit of turnover on the defensive line.
4.6 yards per game in Big 12 play is a disappointing number. They did play some great backs, though. Ollie Gordon, obviously a back that's going to get a lot of yards no matter who he plays. They looked better in the non-conference. 3.91 yards per attempt was what the number finished at the end of the season, which I think is a decent number. Get under 4. That's pretty good, but you want to continue to see that rise. You're an Oklahoma fan. There is a lot of turnover we're going to talk about here with this roster, which could be an issue, but they did make some nice strides. I know the sack number went down, but they were still able to plug the hole and make some nice strides, especially in non-conference play.
Yeah, they still did improve in the trenches, and they were also able to, showcase a nice rotation. You start with the scheme that Venables deploys. It's predicated with that pass rush. A physical front 4. He runs a variation of 4-2-5, 4-3. Typically have a hybrid player out there that makes them, flexible in that regard. Typically a backer that has the size of a defensive back, that 220-pound range. The aggressiveness-like approach makes them more vulnerable, though, through the air. They have lots of aggressive run fits by the safeties. And when coached right, when they have the right talent to plug and play, like you saw at Clemson, it was phenomenal. Guys like Isaiah Simmons were phenomenal hybrids. Barrett Carter this past year played a lot in the slot for the Tigers, and he had a phenomenal year. He's coming back for Clemson. They need to go out there and find players like that. We're going to talk about one they have in the secondary. Going out there and finding those hybrid players that want to play at Oklahoma, Nick, it's going to be very tough, and they're going to have to be very aggressive in that approach. But for me, it's an easy sell if I'm a recruit. I get to go out there, be a vastly important ace in this defense. Shouldn't be a hard sell one bit.
I think you can make the pitch very easily now that you're in the SEC. Like, hey, come be my guy. Be that jack-of-all-trades player. You move him around, get him involved in the defense. I like the system Venables runs. Obviously, we've seen in the past, if the talent's there, this defense can succeed. That is a bit of a concern, right? If the talent isn't there, the defense can certainly struggle a little bit. The scheme has some issues with that, but overall, I think Venables does put together a nice defensive scheme. And we're seeing that as it continues to improve at this point in time, slowly getting better on the defensive side of the ball. Oklahoma was an absolute train wreck in Lincoln Riley's era on defense. defense, and the defense has slowly been improving. And now, the competition's getting a lot better in the SEC, but I think they do have some talented players that can make this game work.
It starts with having that strong defensive line. During those stretches at Clemson, they were incredibly dominant, very productive up front. I mean, a lot of great talent. They had numerous 5-stars playing up there, so obviously that makes the job much easier. Again, the run defense was much better, lots of rotation, lots of searching for playmakers. Looking at who they lose, Isaiah Coe, he's their best player, I thought. He departs. A big loss in Jacob Lacey. He just retired due to blood clots neck. That's one that's probably going to be an underrated loss. I just seen that article a few days ago. So that's something that's going to kick in the high gear in the offseason as people starting to mention that loss, along with Jordan Kelly, Rondell Bothroyd. These are some massive losses, and obviously it's big that they were able to rotate as much as they were last year. But with Lacey's loss, the depth isn't all that great here, especially on the interior defensive line.
Losing Jacob Lacey, I really wish him his best, and his recovery from that. Medically retiring is always a tough thing to see at his age. I thought Rondell Bothroyd was a great player for them on the edge. I think he was a really talented player. 25 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. They lose those stats. Isaiah Cole had 26 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss as well. So that's another piece they're losing there. The production they're losing is definitely a big issue if you're looking at it from the grand scheme of things. I think it does create some problems for this team. Jacob Lacey, another player that they're losing his production. He had 17 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and a sack. So there is a lot of production they have to replace. I think the depth is a bit of an issue. I wish they would have gone out to the portal and maybe addressed some of these issues. Let's see if they can get these guys, plug them in, and see if they have any sort of success.
A guy they snagged from the portal last year from Tennessee, DeJohn Terry. He was great for them as a gap logger, 6'3", 321, some real good strength. He plays hard. He's going to be an anchor here for them. Grayson Helton was efficient, his near 100 snaps. Mainly was just a rotational defensive end, but he should slot in the interior here. Very high-end 5-star in David Stone, 6'4", 275. Already has some good strength. Nice lateral mover. Impressive heavy hands. Does a good job building momentum and finishing, as a disruptive player. They're certainly going to need to lean on him early. Other than that, they're going to need some guys to step up. Again, depth is very questionable right now on the interior defensive line. Devon Sears, 283 pounds, only saw a few snaps last year. Transferred him from Texas State. Ashton Sanders, 281 pounds. He's a sophomore. So this is going to be interesting to see what Venables do. We'll have to, pay attention to spring ball to see what they plug and play on this side of the ball. But I think, a great 5-star in Stone. Terry, I think, is going to be good. Other than that, they're going to have some guys step up. And I think it's not going to be a major issue because Venables really is, a master at this kind of stuff. But on paper, Nick, it's not pretty.
It certainly isn't pretty on paper, but he is going to be able to coach these guys. I think DeJohn Terry is a great player to return. Terry, 18 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, a sack for him. Halton as well, 11 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. So I think they're going to have some nice production there, returning guys that were rotational pieces. They're going to have to take a step forward and really, double or triple their numbers this year.
Even though they lose Rondell Bothroyd and Marcus Stripling off the edge, I definitely think this is a strong unit for them moving forward. Ethan Downs, he's really proven to be a strong run defender over the course of his career. He's been a consistent pass rusher, but really hasn't taken that next step yet. I think, the veteran, it's time for him to really elevate there in that area, even though he's at times really been their best pass rusher. He was, their top sack getter of 4.5 this past season. We certainly want to see him double those numbers. Mason Thomas, he was in line to start last year before preseason injury derailed those plans. He was a good player late in the season for them. Didn't miss a single tackle in 175 snaps. That's a pretty good place to start is tackling ability. PJ Adebawori, he's a former 5-star from last year's class. He was able to gain some experience. Didn't provide much in terms of playmaking or production, but he has impressive physical traits. He's only continued to bulk up. Has a nice motor. This is a player that should start to showcase his ability as a pass rusher. And I think, Trace Ford, he's a big-time veteran, transferred over from Oklahoma State last year. Pretty strange there. Looked like he was a lock for USC. Ends up going to the rival. He's been productive in the past. He's a very reliable rotational piece. And then the final guy that I'm really excited about, Caden Woolard, coming off a great season. Nice career over the last 2 seasons for Miami of Ohio. 9.5 sacks in 2023. I think the edge group is pretty impressive, Nick. There's a lot of potential here for them to work with. I think that's certainly going to alleviate some of the pressure off the interior.
I like Caden Woolard a lot coming over from Miami, Ohio. 4-star out of the portal, a big physical edge rusher. I like his presence that he provides. He is a great player. Ethan Downs, 29 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, plus a pick. He's a nice menace there. Great on the run defense. Also, good numbers in the backfield, 4.5 sacks. That is the highest on the team from last year. So that returning production is great to have when you have a guy, returning your top sack getter there. I like to see him maybe, get to 8 sacks this year potentially. He has great potential to do that.
Yeah, the Sooners are recruiting the trenches, doing impressive too. And I know this incoming class they have has some nice players they're excited for. This upcoming season seems to be a good bunch, though. I think if everyone can showcase improvement, if Stone can come in and be a reliable contributor, I think they should certainly improve that sack number, and I think the run defense should hold up a little bit more, which is they're obviously playing tougher competition. But I definitely think that with Venables as the coordinator, these guys are going to be more aggressive, and that's going to be a big key for them. The middle of the defense, they get everyone back. This unit I'm not as hopeful for, despite that notion. Danny Stutzman, though, how good of a player is this, Nick? We talked about him going in the last season, how he played over 1,000 snaps in 2022, and that led to him just being gassed out. He had 124 tackles, double-figure tackle for loss numbers. This year, some of these guys were able to help him out a little bit more. Ended up playing 12 games, not nearly as many snaps. 16 TFL, 104 tackles. He had a pick 6 as well. So, he was able to play less snaps, and that ended up being highly beneficial for him as he was able to, play with that same gas tank, that same mentality, and be even more, impactful. Kip Lewis, he had a breakout season in terms of production. He's anything better in terms of stopping the run and being, just overall consistent player, though. Jaron Kanek saw an uptick in production as well. But he was the lowest graded defender on the team. Him and Lewis combined for 30 missed tackles, Nick. Those two certainly need to clean up. But what they were able to do last year is they were able to let Stutzman get a breather. And again, that ended up being a big boost for him and this defense.
Danny Stutzman's a great player, just a natural leader. He has 3 sacks in addition to the 16 tackles for loss. The pick 6, like you said, 3 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. Jack of all trades. He can do it all. He's a great veteran leader in the locker room as well, a guy that's going to rally the troops when things get tough. Kip Lewis, I thought he was impressive. Obviously, the missed tackles is concerning, but when he's a young guy, redshirt sophomore, yes, the missed tackles are concerning, but you can work on that in the offseason. That's fundamentals. You can certainly teach that over and over again. I think they did that all offseason. 66 total tackles for Lewis, 3.5 tackles for loss, a sack. He's the second leading tackle getter on the team. Jared Kanak as well. The tackles for loss, or the missed tackles is certainly an issue with him. 6 tackles for loss, though, 62 total tackles and 2 sacks for him. So nice production there. Kobe McKenzie, 22 total tackles down there, 3 pass breakups. He gets his hand up and blocks the ball down occasionally. So I think this is 4 guys they're returning in the middle of the field here that are really good. This unit, I'm a little bit higher on this unit than you are. I think this unit has a nice room for success, a lot of room to grow. If these guys can cut down the missed tackles, I think they're a very formidable unit.
Yeah, Kobe McKenzie was able to gain some valuable experience last year. Just the biggest problem, though, is outside of Stutzman. This is a solid group, but they're going to need to find more toughness and better ability to fly to the ball versus what's a tough SEC. So, we're always hopeful for returning production and experience, certainly. But those notions right there, Nick, the toughness, and you got to be able to fly to the ball, and you got to be disciplined in doing so. I think it's going to be a really tough transition for them in the middle outside of Stutzman.
I think it could be a tough transition. Certainly, I do agree with you on a lot of those comments there. I just have a little more expectations. Hope for this unit. I think I saw a lot in Lewis, where I think he can grow into that star player besides Stutzman and be that nice number 2. I think he does have the room to grow. I think Kobe McKenzie has shown a lot as well potentially there. I think this unit does have a lot of room to grow.
And a player that, I talked about at the top of the show, Deshaun McCullough, he missed time with knee injury, limited his snaps, but he was great when he was on the field. Everyone assumed he'd be a perfect fit for this, Cheetah hybrid role. Played in the slot a good bit, but was a good run stopper in the box. Certainly wonder how he will handle a full workload and how impactful he can be in doing so. But he really is a perfect fit. 6'5", 220. The athletic ability is highly noted. This was a guy who really didn't make too many mistakes last year. Again, he was not able to see the field as much as he would have liked. And it's certainly a concern that when he plays more, he could struggle more, right? But I think this is a guy transferred over from Indiana, was highly coveted. He's going to be a really good football player, Nick, regardless of him playing in the secondary or at a linebacking position. This is one player you're certainly going to notice on tape in the SEC.
Yeah, I like McCullough a lot. I think he's a really solid player. 30 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups in 10 games. He's a guy, I like what I've seen out of him. I think that Cheetah position is a really interesting player they have there. You can really do a lot with that position, in my opinion. If you get a guy that's a good athlete that can really be physical and make great plays there, that can go a long way. If he could step up and be a great player in that position, it could really help out this defense.
If his backup veteran Justin Harrington's not granted a hardship, then true freshman 4-star James Nesta would be the backup. So, extra emphasis on staying healthy for McCullough. Looking at the secondary, they've shown some very encouraging improvements. 37 interceptions over the last 2 seasons. They're out here ball hawking. The unit looked more disciplined, played with more intensity and aggressiveness at times. I thought this past season did a really good job locating the ball, but overall, they allowed a solid amount of big plays. 116th nationally in FBS and 20+ passing yard plays allowed. They're getting back a lot of guys, though. Woody Washington, he's been around a while, played under a few different coaches, really improved last season. I know Venables, he's really happy with his development. He's excited to get Woody back Billy Bowman, coming off a great season in terms of playing in coverage and as a ball hawk. A very poor tackler, though. Missed a team-high 22 stops. This is a guy where you got to kind of take the good with the bad, right? Because when he's on the field, he's productive. 6 interceptions, 3 of them he housed for touchdowns, along with 4 pass breakups and 63 tackles. Those numbers, not many people in the country are going to beat those, Nick. Gentry Williams was also an improved coverage asset, but was pretty horrendous as a tackler himself. And Kenny Walker was also quietly impressive as an outside corner. So they have a few different guys to get here. How do you think these guys translate to the next level, that being the SEC? Because a lot of these guys really struggle to tackle, especially Bowman, who's a must player to have on the field. But if he's not out there fitting the scheme, then, we might certainly see, a downtick in snaps.
Billy Bowman's tackling issues do concern me a lot. 63 total tackles, 6 interceptions, 3 picks, 6, like you said, 4 pass breakups, 3 tackles for loss. Really good numbers there. The missed tackles leading the team. That's a problem. He's got to work on that. Again, I think it's something you can work on, though, in the offseason. That's something that I'm not entirely concerned with. I think you can coach that and figure that out. Woody Washington, I love him as he continues to develop. 48 total tackles, 7 pass breakups, 2.5 tackles for loss. Gentry Williams, 30 total tackles, 4 pass breakups, and 3 interceptions for him, plus 4 tackles for loss. Good numbers there for Williams. I like what I've seen in him. Connie Walker, another guy that's really solid, 24 total tackles, 4 pass breakups, and limited snaps for him. He's a good young player. I think they have nice players. I'm concerned about the depth. I think the depth is a bit of an issue here. The depth chart in general is a little lacking on this backside of this defensive unit here. These guys are good starters, though. If they can all stay healthy, this could be a pretty good unit.
Yeah, Billy Bowman's 100-yard pick 6 ended up being a big difference maker in a game. They only won by 7 points. I do want to clarify, I'm not talking about everybody, because Woody Washington was a great tackler, and he was a phenomenal run defender for them. But guys like Bowman and Williams certainly need to improve in that area. They lose 2 safeties, but they do get back Robert Spears-Jennings. He was a good run defender himself. Peyton Bowen, he was really fun to watch as an ex-5-star. He had, a lot of problems finding his future school. He flipped a couple of times, settled on the Sooners. Showed some nice pop as a hitter. He's looking to be that next big thing at safety. Again, assessing what we talked about, earlier, Nick, is, this scheme, the run fits by the safeties are highly important. And you see Alabama, when they're able to be successful in this conference, because their safeties can come up and make plays in the box right there in the hole, not just with emphasis on hitting, but also you're showcasing, nice discipline as well to be able to find that ball carrier. I think Venables, that's what he's looking for from this safety group this upcoming season. I think Bowen, he's going to be a great player as a former high-end recruit. And overall, I think the secondary will improve. At Clemson, what'd you see, though? A phenomenal pass rush. He was able to get after it and allowed the secondary to really thrive. But they were still putting out plenty of All-American-like players in the back end there. So I want to see improvement from these guys, and I think the potential is certainly there, even though, like you said, the limited depth could be a bit of an issue.
Robert Spears-Jennings is a good player. 38 total tackles for him, 1 pass breakup. Peyton Bowen, 36 total tackles and 5 pass breakups for him. The depth does worry me. I think they have some issues deep down the roster. They lack some of that talent in the SEC in case somebody goes down, God forbid, with an injury. Overall, though, I think the secondary does return a lot of players. They can work on the tackling. That's the biggest issue. Can they figure out the tackling issue? If they can do that, they might have a lot of chance to succeed in the SEC.
I certainly want to see if these guys will be able to fit that mold this upcoming season of this scheme. I think this is going to be an adequate group in the back end, much like the defensive line. If they can improve in all facets, they can be dominant. And what I mean is, it's improving coverage, communication, tackling. I think there's a lot of potential for these groups. I certainly think these numbers should continue to improve even with the, jump in competition. I think this would be a good year for Venables' defense, Nick. I certainly think the potential is there for them to give up a lot of yards. I think getting to the quarterback could be an issue at times. Maybe they're vulnerable up the middle, but I'm not too worried to an extent where I think that it's going to cause them to lose this conference, right? I think if they're going to lose the conference, it's going to be a collective effort from both sides of the ball. I don't think this defense is going to get absolutely brutalized out here. And if it does, though, there's going to be a lot of questions to ask, Nick. Again, it's a real work in progress, but, this would not be a great start to the SEC for, Sooner fandom.
The defense certainly has to hold up their end of the bargain. I think the offense is plenty capable for the conference. The defense, I am a little bit worried, but I think, like we've highlighted, there are some seriously talented players here with a really great defensive-minded head coach running the ship there. So that makes me feel a little bit more confident here. I think they have a good opportunity to succeed with the way that this team is currently structured. It's going to be tough, right? The SEC is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination, and it's definitely a lot different than when you're in the Big 12, where I think the defensive coordinator is a solid player. The 2 defensive coordinators they have splitting the duties, Todd Bates, Zach Alley are all really talented play callers and defensive minds that are going to be working together to set up this defense. I like what I've seen last year. I think they've made a lot of improvements here. They have a lot of talented pieces. I think they should have maybe gone out and got a couple guys in the portal, extra guys in the portal, but overall this defense is not super worrying to me. I think there is a lot of talent here.
to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. Final episode of the day, and I think it'll be fun to discuss these guys again in a couple of months before the season starts. A unit we're going to be paying, a lot of attention to.
Yeah, I look forward to breaking down this Oklahoma team when we get into the later part of our previews. Joining the SEC, I think this team has a lot of potential.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Ugh.